Okay, good morning, folks. I think we're going to get started now. It's about 9 a.m. And so I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to TDA for hosting this morning. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of y'all. My name is Paul Crossley. I'm sure many of you have spoken to me in the past. So thank you all for tuning in. It's great that you're willing to tune in with us this morning, and hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions. I also have with me two of my coworkers. I'll let them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, this is Megan Hahn. Probably talked with a few of you in the past. And Claudia Solis.
And joining us as well is Ellis Powell, one of our esteemed law enforcement professionals. And so he'll be able to answer some questions possibly as well. But Ellis, do you have anything to?
No, good morning, guys. And if we can answer your questions, we'll do our best. And hope this is informative for you.
So I'm going to start off by running through a brief presentation, and I'm going to cover some information on our on some general CWD monitoring questions. We're going to cover information on transfer category status, TC1, TC2 status, permit upgrades. We'll also cover some information on your movement qualification status, and finally, I'm going to we are coming up on the due date for the annual reports. So I'm going to run through an example of submitting an annual report. Just as a refresher, we've had a few people call in to the office with questions on how to submit that report. So I want to make sure that everybody listening today, if you haven't submitted it already, you know exactly how to do that. I think the presentation should only take us about 15 minutes, and then we'll go into question and answer time. So I know that you all have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to answer all of those. So diving in, one of the biggest questions we've had this year is regarding this CWD monitoring page. This on the slideshow here, I've got an example of the new display of information that everybody sees from that CWD monitoring page. So you see at the top here, we have our current report year. Just as a refresher, our current report year right now is report year 2017, and that started on April 1st. So many people won't have any information in this top row. You'll see this dummy account. This is our sort of example account. 0 eligible mortalities reported, 0 not detected postmortem test results for eligible mortalities. And that's because we've just started this report year, and so not many people will have reported any mortalities this year. The past report year is the one we just completed, and it's what you're submitting your annual reports for. And so that ran from April 1st of 2016 through March 31st of 2017. And below that, you see we have information for the past 5 report years as well. Because people, especially those of you who have qualified for transfer category 1 status, by keeping up with a high level of postmortem testing, this is where you'll be able to track your 5-year record for postmortem testing and ensure that you have submitted an adequate number of samples in order to maintain that transfer category 1 status, or be on track to be able to qualify for transfer category 1 status. And then, of course, below that is your overall testing rate. That would be a record of all the postmortem tests that you've done since your permit, since the first time your permit was issued. And so the column off to the right-hand side here, your herd size, this is going to be your cumulative herd for just the past report year. So that'd be the total number of eligible aged deer present in your facility on March 31st, plus the total number of eligible mortalities that had been reported for that report year. And then below that, the 5-year herd size, that's the cumulative herd size for the past 5 report years. And then we provided this final column to the right-hand side, the minimum number of tests required for that time period. And so with this example herd, you see in the past report year, their total herd size for the 2016 report year was 27 animals, meaning that in order to remain movement qualified, this facility would need to provide at least 1 postmortem test result. Okay, and so that is sort of the new information on your CWD monitoring page, CWD testing page. And so that kind of leads into your transfer category status. Now there are, I wanted to cover again the 3 means by which somebody could qualify for transfer category 1. I know lots of people are have already upgraded their permit to transfer category 1 status. There are still some people who we need to review, but we are going through those as quickly as possible. Of course, anybody with a 5th year or certified status with Texas Animal Health Commission, you should have already been made transfer category 1 as soon as you achieve that status. And so that has remained the same. Anybody with 5th year or certified status with Texas Animal Health Commission's herd monitoring program has that TC1 status already. Additionally, as we pointed out on the CWD testing page, if you have tested 80% of your eligible mortalities over the past 5 report years and provided that minimum number of tests equal to 3.6% of your total eligible population, then you will also have achieved TC1 status. And we'll be reviewing this when we review your annual report. Additionally, many people have conducted antemortem testing in their breeding facilities and tested 50% of their eligible population and received their transfer category 1 upgrades. Now we are still reviewing a number of TC1 upgrades for those people who received their provisional upgrade by testing the first 25% of their herd. So again, those the full 50% must be submitted to our office by May 15th. And I know that we have received a few batches of tests from other facilities, and so we'll be reviewing those as quickly as possible. And so with the annual reports, we are reviewing your movement qualification status as well. Again, the requirements to remain movement qualified are to test 80%, at least 80% of your eligible age mortalities that occur within the report year. Additionally, all breeders must test at least 3.6% of their eligible aged herd. So provide a minimum number of tests each year. And again, on the CWD monitoring page, that's this number here, the minimum number of tests required. So if with a smaller sized herd, in this example, 27 animals, they would need 3.6% of that would be roughly 1 test. If you had additional animals, say if there were 100 eligible aged animals in your herd for the past report year, then you would need to provide 4 tests in order to remain movement qualified, for post-mortem tests, because 3.6% would round up to 4. So if for any reason you did not provide that minimum number of post-mortem tests, either by not experiencing mortalities or having reported mortalities but not been able to get a valid test result, perhaps the animal was too decomposed and you couldn't get a not detected result from the tissue, then you may be temporarily made not movement qualified, but you can substitute for those missed postmortem tests by conducting additional antemortem testing. And antemortem testing can substitute for either or both requirement, either not having tested 80% of your mortalities or not providing the minimum number of tests. And those can be substituted, pardon me, at a 3-to-1 exchange. So if you were short by 1 postmortem test, you could provide 3 antemortem tests to make up the difference. So there have been a number of people who have been made temporarily not movement qualified because of a lack of testing, either missing that 80% 80% requirement or the minimum number of tests. But like I said, they'll be able to make up for the lacking tests by doing antemortem testing. If you have tests pending at the lab, I know a number of people have had their test results delayed. We will be revisiting your movement qualification status as soon as your test results come in. When you receive those test results, I do encourage you to contact our office, either any of our numbers or our rollover line. Any of us would be happy to help. You can also reach us by email by sending an email to our shared inbox, that dear.breeder@tpwd.texas.gov email address. And once your test results are in, we'll review your testing and be able to reset you to movement qualified status as soon as those results come in. I do want to clarify, though, that if you have a lack of tests or missed some mortalities in the past report year, the substitution must come from antemortem testing. Postmortem tests of eligible age mortalities will be counted for the current report year, but cannot be used to make up for a lack of tests in the previous report year. And so do not euthanize animals in order to regain your movement qualification status. The substitution testing to make up for whatever missed postmortem tests in the previous report year must come from antemortem testing at the 3-to-1 exchange. And so this brings us to our annual report. Again, it is due this upcoming weekend on May 15th. Only the permit holder may submit that report. So if you have a ranch manager or a designated agent who handles a lot of the paperwork on the computer, fortunately, they won't have access to the annual report. Only the permit holder themselves will be able to submit that. Also, if you have a multi-year permit, then you still need to submit your annual report and reconcile the inventory, but you won't need to pay any of your renewal fee because you paid that with your multi-year permit. And so at this time, as an example, I'd like to run through an annual report. We have an account that we use for testing, and I'm going to switch over to that right now, and we'll get logged in, and I'd like to actually just walk through and submit an annual report so everybody can have an idea of where to go to access that and apparently I'm having trouble logging in. Here we are. So this is our welcome screen, of course. And for those of you following along at home, should be able to see this on the screen now. So to obviously submit your Deer Breeder permit renewal, we would go to Deer Breeder permits, herd tracking, and release site reporting. And then you can access the annual report by clicking on the breeder permit link. And that will display your facility information for your breeder permit. And you'll see now there's this blue link on the right-hand column. It says Begin Annual Report. And so we would click on that. If you were submitting a notification of closure, or if you were transferring your permit to a new landowner, somebody who's taking over your facility, you would go through the closure checklist on the furthest right column. But I assume most people listening in today will be submitting their annual report if they haven't done so already. And so now it asks you to certify that you are who you say you are. So I certify that I am authorized to submit this annual report. And then that takes us to our report checklist. And we have to go through every item on this checklist. So to do that, you just hit that start button next to each item on that list. And this is just an acknowledgement of the regulations, that all the deer, have been assigned their unique numbers, that everything is ready to be submitted. So check, I have read the paragraph above and acknowledge. And now we see that we have that green check mark next to that item on the checklist. So breeder information. This is where you would make any updates. If you wanted to change your email address, for instance, you need to update your phone number or your mailing address. So once you make sure that's all that information is correct, submit and return to checklist. And then we can submit our information, any updates to the facility itself. If you have changed the layout of your pens, if added any pens or taken any off of your permit, you can make that update. If you need to update the number of deer you wish to have on your permit, we can update that here on the max number of white-tailed deer or max number of mule deer. To upload a new plat file, you would click on that link that says choose. You would download upload a copy to your computer, PDF file or a picture file like a JPEG. and you can upload that here, and then we'll review the changes to your permit when we review your report. So, but if you have no changes to make, then you would just acknowledge that all this is correct and hit this button down at the bottom, submit. Then we can look at the pen information. This is if you are maintaining your inventory pen by pen in TWIMS. If not, then we can go back to the checklist or go to the agent information. It's worth noting that as you complete your annual report, you can navigate away from this page, and TWIMS will have saved all of your work up to this point, and you can come back to it later if you have something else that you need to take care of. But it's a fairly quick process, so you can add new agents or remove agents from this screen. We don't have any agents to add, but if we did, we would just click on this button that says Add New Agent and provide their information. Now we can get into reconciling the inventory. So if we wanted to add some, if we need to enter in our fawn information, all the births that occurred in this past report year, we would do that here. So let's go ahead and walk through that. We're going to add a fawn. There's a white-tailed deer. And estimated birth date, let's just say it was born on June 1st of 2016. Go ahead and enter that. And so you can see here, this, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this screen. So we see we've already got the white-tailed deer entered. We would select the unique number that we assigned to that animal, 05NE. Let's just say that we tag that with a yellow number 1 tag. Make sure to select a sex for that animal, and then submit. And that will have created this deer, registered this deer in the online database. So if that's all we need to take care of there, we submit and reconcile our inventory. And this shows your full inventory, all the deer that are present in were present in the facility at one time during this report year, and including the deer that we just added. That was this one here, 05NE. We just added this animal. And so if this looks correct, then we can move on. If you have to report the death of an animal, then you would provide that information here. So if this animal 00AK had passed away this year, we would provide a cause of death, accidental death or injury, for instance, and the date of death for that deer. So if that animal had died back in February, for instance, February 1st, then you would provide the date of death there. And then when you hit this button, submit and return to the checklist, that will register the death of that animal. And finally, enter CWD test results. Because we only made the connection between the TBMDL database and the TWIMS database in August, it's possible that you may have some eligible mortalities reported, but not have the test results automatically downloaded from the lab. If that is the case, if you have a copy of a test report from TBMDL that you do not see reflected on this page, then you can still upload that test report for us, and we'll review that with your report. And so to do that here, it's just like you had to do previously. You would get the PDF copy of that test report or an image of that test report, and you could upload that for whichever animal you had tested. So upload the CWD test result, choose the file from your computer, and then hit that upload button. So this is from this screen. You can also see any antemortem testing that was conducted at your facility. This deer eligible for testing. If you needed to, if for instance you hadn't submitted the necessary number of postmortem test results, this list here would show you the animals in your facility that are eligible to be tested if you needed to provide any antemortem substitution. But if you have all of your CW test results recorded here and this all looks correct, then you would just click on this submit and return to checklist. And that takes us through the full annual report checklist. And so then you would just submit your report, and TWIMS will ask you if you want to pay online with a credit card or if you wanted to submit payment by mail and send in a check. But that takes us through our complete annual report checklist. And I think we are receiving some questions, and so want to move on to that as quickly as possible. Claudia, what do we have on the line right now? So somebody has asked if they have one mortality on file, but no test results yet, what should I do? That's a very good question, one we've received quite a lot this year. I do encourage you to submit your annual report as quickly as possible. We don't want there to be any possibility that you missed that May 15th deadline. A lot of people have waited a bit longer than in previous years to submit their reports because there are people waiting for their test results to come in. And so we are building up a backlog of reports that need to be reviewed. But we will review them as quickly as possible. We review them in the order in which they're received. And so we're still working through annual reports from people who submitted in April. But if you are still waiting on a test result to come in, and we review your annual report, when we renew the permit and review the report, you will be made temporarily not movement qualified. But as soon as your test results come in, you can contact our office. We'll review your testing and review the results that were received, and we'll immediately switch you back to movement qualified status. So there may be a temporary disruption in your ability to move deer, but as soon as those results come in, you can contact us and be back to movement qualified status right away. We know that people need to be able to move deer, and so we want to make sure that we get you that authority as quickly as possible. So even if you have a temporary disruption in your movement qualification status, you can always contact us, and we'll get you back to movement qualified status as quickly as possible. So the next question on here, somebody sees that there are 2 tests required for their 3.6% minimum number of tests. Is there a deadline to get those in? So I guess this refers to the CWD monitoring page. I'm going to switch back to our presentation briefly just to have this in front of us. So that would refer to this minimum number of tests required for time period. For that, where on this example it says 1 test, and in this person's case there were 2 required. And so we don't have a deadline for when those need to be received, but as I said before, if we didn't have those test results on file when we reviewed the report, you would be temporarily made not movement qualified. If you received the results back from the lab, a week or 2 weeks after we reviewed your report, then you could just contact our office and we'll switch you back to movement qualified status. However, if you didn't have test results, like you didn't have experienced that many mortalities in the previous report year, then you could make up for those missed postmortem tests with antemortem testing. So in the case where there are two tests required, if you had no mortalities the past report year, then you would provide 6 antemortem tests in order to get back to movement qualified status. And there's no time frame, no deadline for that. You can get that done on your own schedule. Weather is still relatively cool. It may be possible to get those results right now. Or if you don't plan on releasing deer this spring, you could wait until the weather cools off again in the fall and just stay at not movement qualified status until you're ready to get those test results in and get back to movement qualified status for the fall. So another question here, what are the movement qualification requirements for facilities less than 6 months with TC1 deer? So if you received your permit recently, within the past 6 months, then you do not need to provide that minimum number of CWD test results. So this would only apply, though, to people who received a new permit within 6 months of the end of the report year. So anybody permitted from, I guess it would be October 31st and after. If you received your permit November through the end of the last report year, then and brought your first shipment of deer in from somebody in transfer category 1, then you'll maintain your TC1 status, and be able to stay movement qualified, because we understand that, with a brand new facility, brand new herd of deer, you're likely not going to have any mortalities in those first few months. Next report year, though, you will need to comply with both the 80% of your mortalities and the minimum number of tests, the 3.6% minimum number of tests. Okay, somebody has also asked, how can I qualify for a multi-year permit renewal? It's a very good question. To qualify for a multi-year permit, you need to have had a deer breeder's permit for 5 years and been in the statute it says must be in substantial compliance with the regulations, and so that would mean no late report submissions, no deer breeder permit violations, and so as long as you've not had any issues, then you should be eligible for a multi-year permit. I received a new permit in next question. I received a new permit in April of 2017. Part of this herd has been antemortem testing. Does this affect my movement qualification status? No, it would not. If you've just received your permit in the past month, you'll still need to submit an annual report because all deer breeder permits expire in the year that they're created. But you won't have been in business for over 6 months, obviously, and therefore you won't have any disruption in your movement qualification status. You'll still be able to bring additional deer in, still be able to release deer onto a release site or to another breeder. So, next question, is 12 months old considered an eligible aged mortality? Under the Parks and Wildlife regulations, no. Parks and Wildlife states that eligible age mortalities are those deer that are 16 months old and older. Now, Animal Health Commission's herd monitoring program does require that all deer over 12 months old be tested for CWD. But the CWD testing page with that table of information will only be counting those deer that are 16 months and older. So that is a good question, and if you are enrolled in Animal Health Commission's herd certification program, certainly do keep up with the postmortem testing for those deer 12 months old and older. Another question, can we use surplus tests towards substitution for missed mortalities? Another great question, yes. When we are reviewing annual reports, if you had done antemortem testing to qualify for TC1 status, when we're reviewing an annual report, if that facility had done antemortem testing to qualify for TC1 status, we do review those tests, and we open up your permit upgrade, and we see if there were surplus tests taken that we could put towards substitution. So yes, we are using surplus antemortem tests from the 2016 report year to substitute for either a lack of postmortem tests or missing postmortem tests. That's a very good question. As just as an example, if for the sake of easy math, if you'd had a herd of 100 animals in your facility and upgraded to TC1 status, you would have needed to provide a minimum of 50 antemortem not detected results to upgrade to TC1 status. A lot of people would take some extra samples just to be safe in case they got inconclusive results. And so if you had taken, let's say you'd taken tissue samples from 60 deer and 59 of them came back not detected. So you'd achieved your TC1 upgrade by having taken 50 samples and gotten not detected results, and that would leave you with 9 surplus tests. So that could substitute for up to 3 missing postmortem tests. And so we are reviewing those case by case with your annual report. And generally the way we're going to be applying the antemortem tests is they can substitute for mortalities in the year that they're taken or the previous report year. And so if you had some surplus tests from 2016, those are going to be applied to substitute for any lacking postmortem tests from 2016 or if you are made not movement qualified, then you can take some antemortem tests in this report year, and we'll apply those to the missing postmortem tests from the previous report year. But yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. Next question: why is the 3.6% requirement rounded up? Example: 1.008 tests required for the report year. And it's rounded up because unfortunately we can't test just a partial deer. And so because we needed to increase the total amount of disease surveillance around the state, we do round up. And that has been the case really since CWD testing became required for deer breeding facilities. We've always had to round up, even with the old 20% cumulative postmortem testing. That was always rounded up as well. So this person asks, we live animal tested 100% of our herd. We have 1 deer tested and require 2. Must we euthanize a deer for testing? Again, in order to make up for a lack of postmortem tests in the previous report year, we cannot apply euthanized postmortem eligible age deer to make up for a lack of testing in the previous report year. Only antemortem testing can be used to substitute for lack of postmortem tests, whether that be because you didn't test enough of your mortalities or you didn't have enough mortalities to test. So in this person's scenario, they live tested 100% of their eligible aged herd. And so I'm assuming they would have a large number of surplus antemortem tests from the previous report year. And if that's the case, then those tests will be used to substitute for the lack of postmortem tests from that facility.
We have a few more questions coming.
Okay, so next person has asked, am I not movement qualified when I submit my annual report? Is there a grace period? And I don't think that a grace period is really the best way to describe this. Your facility won't automatically be made not movement qualified. The database does not make those updates to your permit status right away. That is reviewed by myself, Claudia, and Megan, and our staff. So if you were to submit your annual report today, chances are we won't be able to review that report for a few weeks because we do have a large backlog of them. There are over 1,200 permit holders in the state, and we have to review each one individually. So it may take us a little bit of time to get to your report. And so by that time, your test results may have come in. So for instance, if you'd had a deer die in February or March, and you sent the test results off to the lab, but you haven't gotten the results back yet, you could still submit your report today, and by the time we reviewed your annual report in 2 or 3 weeks, those results probably will have come in by then, and there wouldn't be any disruption in your movement qualification status. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a grace period, but there is going to be some delay between the time when you submit your report and by the time we actually get to review your report. So I do still strongly encourage you to get your report in sooner rather than later. Better safe than sorry, I always say. So get your annual report submitted as quickly as you can, and we'll get that your renewal turned around as quickly as possible. So next person has asked, I have my provisional TC1 live test at the lab. Do I maintain my TC1 status if those results are not back by May 15th? Unfortunately, no. Your facility would be downgraded to TC2 status at that time. If those, because you'd received your provisional upgrade, presumably you began your testing last fall. Some people even began in testing, a full year ago, in the spring of 2016. If your second batch of test results are not in our office by May 15th, unfortunately, you would be made not TC2 again. And that is because in the regulations, the commission was very clear that if you were to receive a provisional TC1 upgrade, you needed to have the full 50% of your eligible aged antemortem test results to our office by May 15th. However, we have spoken with our supervisor, and he has conferred with Parks and Wildlife leadership that in the case that your test results aren't back to us by May 15th, then you will need to continue to do antemortem testing to upgrade the TC1 status, but you won't be starting completely from scratch. What we will do is use your start date as we will change the start date to your second round of testing. So whenever you begin your testing, after you've received your provisional TC1 upgrade, the next batch of tests of tissue samples that you collected, we'll use that as your start date, as your updated start date. For an example, let's say I was upgrading my facility to TC1 status, and I pulled 25% of my samples on September 1st. And then I pulled my second the next 25% on March 1st. And I received my provisional TC1 upgrade back in September, but I don't maintain that TC1 status because my test results don't come back in time. Well, now what we will do, instead of me having to start over completely, we will use that second round of testing as the new start date. So we would use my eligible age population on March 1st, and I would need to provide the rest of the samples from that. So that second round of testing would still count towards my TC1 upgrade, but that would be my new start date. So now here's another question. How do we update RFID numbers in TWIMs? A number of permit holders are using RFIDs, and they are required if you're enrolled in Animal Health Commission certification program. And unfortunately, at this time, the RFID field, once it is entered, it becomes static. I'm sure a lot of people who have needed to make those updates have run into that. And so you, as an external user, as a permit holder, won't be able to update that information. But you can contact our office, send us an email to our shared inbox, and then one of us in the office will take care of that as quickly as possible. And we'll be sending out another email to the industry shortly. Make sure that everybody has that email address, and I'm sure TDA will be able to provide it to you as well. But just send us an email with the unique number for the deer and the new RFID number, and we will go ahead and enter that for you. It is something that our IT department is looking into updating for you to be able to update yourself, but for the time being, it is something that you'll have to contact our office to make those changes for you. But we're happy to help with that, so certainly don't be shy. So next question, is there a difference between TC1 status and movement qualification status? Yes, there is. And the two are independent of each other. Your TC1 status is your transfer category status. That determines what privileges you have in releasing deer to a release site. Does that release site downgrade to Class 2 status, or does it remain Class 1 status? Whereas your movement qualification is your ability to move deer, either releasing deer to a release site, sending deer to another breeding facility, or receiving deer from another breeding facility. So you could have TC1 status and not be movement qualified, or you could be TC2 and movement qualified. So those are separate statuses. But let's say I know a lot of people have been concerned that if they did their antemortem testing, for instance, and received their TC1 upgrade, but they didn't test all of their mortalities in the previous report year, or they didn't experience many mortalities and are temporarily made not movement qualified, that's not going to affect your TC1 status. You'll still remain TC1, but you'll be made temporarily not movement qualified until we receive the number of test results needed to get you back to movement qualified status. So next, when is my eligible aged herd size calculated for movement qualification requirements? Another good question, and that is that population is determined on March 31st. That's the final day of the report year. And so when you submit your annual report and reconcile your full herd inventory, then that means that that is the total number of eligible aged deer. So it's going to be it's going to be two numbers. First is the number of eligible aged deer that are alive in your facility on March 31st, plus the total number of eligible mortalities that you reported in that year. And so let's say on March 31st of this year, I had 50 eligible aged animals alive in the pens, and I'd reported 2 mortalities. Then my total herd population would be 52, because I've got the 50 animals that are alive in the pens, reported 2 eligible mortalities this previous report year. So that's a total of 52 animals that make up my full herd, my full eligible aged herd. And then, of course, we provide that column in the CWD testing page, telling you how many tests would be required for that size herd. Okay. Another question: is the 3.6% and 80% requirement year-specific, or can you use your 5-year average for movement qualified status? That's a good question. There is a distinction there. The requirements to stay movement qualified are that you must test 80% of your eligible age mortalities in each year. And also, you must test 3.6% of your total herd each year as well. And so I don't think there are going to be many people who are affected by this, but it is possible that you would see on your 5-year average, your 5-year testing history, that you would have tested more than 80% over the previous 5 report years, but not tested 80% in the past report year. Like I said, I don't think many people would see that, but it is possible. Unfortunately, you would still be made not movement qualified at that time. Like, let's say you had done a lot of testing in the 2015 report year, but not done enough testing in the 2016 report year. You would still be made temporarily not movement qualified. The requirements are to provide that number of tests each year. And so you would temporarily be made not movement qualified, but you could always substitute with some additional antemortem testing to make up for whatever number of tests were missed. So next question: when will my release site be upgraded if I complied with all Class 2 requirements? So that's a very good question. There were a number of people who had not done their TC1 upgrade in this past autumn before the 10-day antler cutoff date. But part of our transition provisions for this year were, if a release site was downgraded to Class 2 status, but complied with all of their testing requirements and harvest requirements for this report year, and the contributing deer breeding facility had upgraded to TC1 status, then that release site will be eligible to upgrade to Class 1 at the end of this report year. And so we're going to be looking into, we haven't been upgrading release sites yet because the CWD tests for release sites aren't due yet. Those are only due on May 15th. And so there's still some time for those release sites to provide their test results from their harvested deer. And so we haven't been reviewing the release site reporting yet, but we will be transitioning into that very shortly. If you own a Class 2 release site and you would like us to review that, you can always send us an email and we'll review that as quickly as possible. We do have a number of people who have contacted our office saying that I believe my release site is eligible to be reset to Class 1 status, and we'll be reviewing those very shortly. But with the annual reports for breeding facilities coming in, those have taken precedence over the release site reporting, just because we know that people want to get their permits turned around and have their breeder permits renewed. So we have been focusing more on the breeder permit renewals, but we will be reviewing release sites very shortly. So next up, somebody has submitted their MLD harvest log. Where do I upload my CWD results for the release site? And that's a very good question and worth covering. So I'm actually going to switch back over to TWIMS for those of you following along at home on the computer. I'm going to switch back to our Twins page and take you over to the release site reporting. So to access your harvest log for the previous hunting season, that's done through the deer/inventory lookup page, and this takes you to a list of all the facilities associated with your name. And this account we're logged into right now is just an account that we use in our office for testing things in the computer. So I'm not displaying you information for anybody's permit. But you'll see on this list of facilities here, on the far right side, there's this column labeled Harvest Log. And so if you have a release site, you'll see that harvest log available to you there. So you click on that View button to pull up the harvest log. And because we're in the new report year, it will default right now to the 2017-18 season. This isn't what we need right now. So we need to select the 2016-17 report year, which would be the previous hunting year. So select that from that drop-down menu there, and then hit Go. And that'll pull up your harvest log for the previous report year. So in this harvest log, we still have an open status, so we'll need to complete the log. And you'll see here that we've got the 3 animals that were reported harvested this previous report year. There's one, the first deer was presumed to be a breeder deer, but we couldn't read the ID on it. Next one was a free-ranging doe, and then there was another breeder deer with unique number 0077. And so if you don't already have your test results submitted to Twins, then you can upload those test results right here using this upload feature. Or if your harvest log isn't complete, then you can always add harvest by entering a deer. So let's say there was another breeder deer that was harvested that we didn't record yet. Select the unique number, harvest log line number 4, and let's say it was harvested in December 15th, and then submit. And that will add that deer to the top of your harvest log. And then if you had CWD tests that you don't see reflected here, then you can upload those using this upload button. Have the file saved to your computer, and then choose file and be able to select that right there. And then just hit that upload button when you've got the correct file, and we'll review that information as quickly as possible. So that's a very good question. Thank you for that. So next, somebody asks, if I'm missing CWD test results, do I wait to submit my renewal? All renewals are due by May 15th, and that is a hard deadline. So please do get that into us as quickly as possible. Even if you don't have your test results back from the lab yet, it's possible that in the time it takes for us to actually pull up your annual report and review that information, it's entirely possible that those test results will have come in from the lab, and so there would be no disruption to your movement qualification status anyway. If we get, if by some miracle we get through a lot of annual reports very quickly, and you still don't have your test results on file, there may be a temporary disruption in your movement qualified status. You may be temporarily made not movement qualified if we don't have those test results back yet. But as soon as you got your results in, you can contact our office, and we'll review your test results, and we'll switch you back to movement qualified status right away. And so I'd still strongly recommend that you submit your annual report and just get that into us so you don't miss that May 15th deadline. And as soon as you get your test results in, just make sure you contact our office, and we'll get you back to movement qualified status if we made you not movement qualified at all. And just as a point of clarification, if we do make somebody not movement qualified for any reason, we do contact them. And so if you submit your report, if we don't have the test results that we need, then we'll contact you when we renew your permit. And so indicate to you that you have been made temporarily not movement qualified, and we'll tell you how many tests that we would need to get you back to movement qualified status, and then you'll be able to contact us as soon as those tests come in. Okay. My coworkers have reminded me we do have our law enforcement personnel here, so if there are any questions for them, certainly ask those as well. But let's see. I see Claudia writing away studiously. So here's another CWD testing question. If I just had a mortality occur in my pens, can it be put towards any missed mortalities in previous report years? I'm afraid not. So let's say in the previous report year, I didn't have any mortalities, but I needed to provide at least one in order to remain movement qualified. So let's say yesterday a deer died in my pens, and so this person asked, is it possible for me to use that mortality that occurred yesterday to substitute for my lack of testing in the previous report year? Unfortunately not. The requirements set forth by the Commission state that you must have testing in each report year. And so that mortality that occurred yesterday will count towards my testing percentage for the current report year, for the 2017 report year, April 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2018. But because that mortality occurred in this current report year, it won't be used for your testing rate in the previous report year. So in my situation, I would need to still do take three antemortem tests, live animal tests, in order to make up for my lack of testing in the previous report year. That's a very good question, though. Thank you for bringing that up. Next, where do I find my transfer category status and release site status? And that's a very good question. We do receive that one quite a bit. So I'm still logged into TWIMS right now. And so you can find your transfer category status from your facility detail page. So if you're logged into TWIMS and you click on that link for facility, that will show you all of your different facilities. And you can pull up the details for any of those facilities by clicking on the facility ID link. So this displays your information here, and you'll see down here in this box near the bottom, the status. You can see that you're movement qualified, and this facility has transfer category 2 status. Okay. Same for a release site. If you go back to the facility page and you pull up your information for a release site, this one here, you'll see here this release site still has a class 1 status. And that's because this facility has not ever received any deer from a PC2 facility. So.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, there's been some questions in the past about, and I think you just answered this in an email that y'all sent out, but if I'm missing a test, may I notify the department and log in and euthanize an animal to count towards last year's requirements? Did you answer that question?
Yes, that one has come up quite a bit, and we have received guidance from our leadership at Parks and Wildlife, Clayton Wolf, the Wildlife Division Director, and he has indicated that no, euthanized animals post-mortem substitution will not be used to substitute for mortalities in the previous report year. And so please do not euthanize animals to become movement qualified if you were missing postmortem tests in the previous report year. And so if you need it, and that's for either standard. If you were, let's say you hadn't tested all of your mortalities, only tested 3 out of 5, for instance, or if you simply didn't experience mortalities and therefore didn't have anything to test, post-mortem samples from euthanized deer will not be used to substitute for a lack of tests in the previous report year. As Patrick pointed out, we did send an email out about that late last week, and so we are encouraging people only use antemortem tests to substitute for a lack of tests in the previous report year. Okay, so but yes, thank you for pointing that out. That's we want to make that abundantly clear, that we don't want people to be in a situation where they feel the need to euthanize animals to make up for missing tests from the previous report year. So another person asks, if I become not movement qualified and I don't want to work my deer right now because they're pregnant, is there a deadline for me to get my substitution test in? It's a very good point. A lot of does are very heavy with fawns right now, and the weather is heating up. Especially some parts of South Texas, it's getting very warm, and that working the deer when it's hot like that and when they're pregnant can put a lot of stress on those animals. And so we don't have a deadline. You're not required to submit substitution tests to us at any specific time. If you wanted to wait until the fall, if you weren't planning to do any spring releases right now, then you can wait till the fall when the weather cools off and those fawns are weaned to take your antemortem tests to substitute for whatever was missing from the previous report year. That's a very good question. So yes, we're not requiring that you get this done right away. You can wait to do it on your own time. If there's a season that's better for you, you can certainly wait. So thank you for that. Next person asks, I've missed a mortality and see that on my CWD monitoring page, it says substitution program. What does that mean? Well, that's a good question. I'm going to pull up our CWD monitoring page here, and we'll just take a look at that screen together. So go to my breeding facility for the CWD monitoring page. And so by looking down here at the bottom at your live testing, you can view the deer in your facility that are eligible for testing. And you can also display any previous antemortem testing that's been conducted. In this dummy account, we haven't done any. But you can select this icon here, Start Antemortem Tests. So if you've been made temporarily not movement qualified, you can hit this button, and you'll view this pop up. Now this facility is in transfer category 2, and therefore TWIMS wants to know, are you going to do antemortem testing to upgrade to TC1 status, or are you doing this for another purpose? And so we're going to, is this test for upgrading the facility to transfer category 1? No, we're going to do some antemortem testing to substitute for previous report years. And so this is where I would create my accession form. So if I needed to substitute for one postmortem test from the previous report year and I was going to do 3 antemortem tests, this is where I would come to select the deer that were tested. Let's say I tested yellow 19, yellow 39, and blue 29, and then I would create the accession form, and TWIMS would ask me, what samples did I take? When did I take those samples? So I took those samples on April 1st, or well, let's say I took them yesterday, so May 8th, just like that right here, and I took rectal biopsy samples. Could apply both of those, and then by clicking on this print accession form, that would create your accession form. And as soon as TWIMS received those results from TVMDL, we would be notified and we'd be able to make you movement qualified again. So this question, how do I find my CWD zone for transfer purposes? I assume this question is getting at the new CWD zones in Medina County, in Medina, Uvalde, and Bandera area. And everybody who is in the zone should have been contacted already. If you wanted to double check though, you can come back to your, to the facility page, and by pulling up these details, the detail page for your breeding facility, we would show you whether you are in a CWD zone. Don't we, guys?
It should show. I'm not sure if it just shows on our end.
So you'll have to forgive me. When we are logged into TWIMS as the Parks and Wildlife employees, we see some slightly different information. So I guess actually we don't display whether you are in a CWD zone or not. But for those people operating in the CWD zone, you will be made non-movement qualified because there are some additional requirements regarding the release of deer. But for those people who are operating breeding facilities inside the CWD zone, do contact our office if you have any questions, and we'll explain that in more detail because there are some additional requirements. But the majority of our permit holders are not inside any CWD zone.
There's no other question. Those are the last ones.
So that seems to be the last of the questions, unless I'm sorely mistaken. Patrick, did you have anything additional you'd like us to cover?
No. If anybody has any more questions, we have Ellis and Kevin here. other than that, I think y'all done a phenomenal job. Thank you so much for coming to our office.
No problem. I appreciate you having us.
Yep. So for the folks online, on the phone and online, we are going to have a similar presentation to this with Ellis Powell on specifically LOAs, landowner authorizations. We're going to do this exact thing and go through all the mechanics of an LOA and then some of the pitfalls and problems you may run into. So again, at a later date, we're going to have Ellis back and go through the LOAs as well.
So we did actually receive one additional question. How many? Oh, there are two additional questions. I'm sorry. If we are TC1, if you are a TC1 release site, it looks like the sentence got cut off there for some reason. But I assume you're getting at if you have a Class 1 release site, what are your testing requirements? Well, if you have a Class 1 release site, you are not required to test hunter harvested deer for CWD, nor are you required to submit any additional harvest log information. So if you have a Class 1 status on your release site, you don't need to worry about testing hunter harvested deer for CWD, and you don't need to submit an additional release site harvest log. Somebody else has asked how many CWD positives were found in the past year, and I don't actually remember the exact number off the top of my head. Patrick, do you?
Yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to present incorrect information. So you can contact the department, and we'd be happy to provide those numbers for you. But unfortunately, right now, I simply don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to be presenting misinformation. So
there is a question. Will Tpwd have a webinar on the MLDP requirements?
That's a good question. Not right now, but
Planning on it?
We talking about with us, or
Yeah, I think it's MLDP.
I know. Alan King and them are working on getting some stuff together. I don't know what format it'll be, but yes,
yeah. So
there will be.
So our whitetail deer program leader, Alan Kane, is putting together some presentations for the new MLD changes, and so we'll coordinate. There will be probably public meetings on that, and we'll coordinate to try and get that information out to landowners as soon as possible. That's a very good question, but we here in the deer breeder office don't have access to wildlife management plans, and so really the best person for that, the person leading the charge on the MLD updates is Alan Kane, our whitetail deer program leader. So, but he'll be getting information out on that as soon as he can.
Here's a good question. Do CWD test results follow the deer when they are transferred?
Yes, very good question. And they do to an extent. The record is maintained for that animal. However, the results are applied to the facility that actually pulled those samples. And so let's say that I was a new breeder and I just received my permit, and I brought some deer in from somebody who's been in business for a while, and they upgraded the TC1 status by conducting antemortem testing. Well, if I receive some of those deer that he used to upgrade the TC1 status, then those deer will have a recorded test result on file, but that result will have been used for the previous owner's TC1 upgrade. And so I wouldn't be able to test that deer this year if I needed to do substitution testing, for instance, because a deer can only be tested once every 2 years. So that's a good question. So yes, the test result will follow that deer, but it will only be applied to the facility who actually took that test sample.
Here's a question. On your 5-year reporting, if your minimum number of tests were 12 mortalities, but you have 10 not detected post-mortem results, are you compliant or have you satisfied that requirement?
So let me just double check here. So the 5-year minimum is 12 eligible mortalities, but you only had 10 tests.
I'm guessing it's for the 3.6.
So for that, for the 5-year testing rate, that would you would not have satisfied all the requirements to remain TC1. But as long as in the previous reporting year you had tested 80% of your mortalities, you would still remain movement qualified. So if you're concerned about your TC1 status based on your postmortem testing rate, certainly call us and we'll review that information with you over the phone. So.
Here's a question. If I am new and just got all TC1 deer that are tested in my pens, how can I test in the following years?
And that's a good point. If you have just received your permit and the deer that you brought in have all previously been tested with an antemortem test, how are you going to be able to test to keep up with your testing requirements? And well, it is always possible that an animal will pass away of natural causes, and just be sure to have that animal tested. Just to be on the safe side, certainly always test your eligible age mortalities. But of course, as your herd grows, you will have additional animals age up into that eligible age status. And so in the first year, that may be a challenge for you. You may need to wait until you have enough deer in eligible age deer that haven't been tested previously. But it would just depend on the herd that you have in your facility.
We do have what is the MLDP deadline to sign up? I think that might be a question better suited for. Yeah,
and that would be best suited for your local biologist that you work with. So if you have any questions about your specific MLD information or want even more general information about the changes coming to the NLD program, certainly contact your local biologist. They're a good resource for that. If for some reason you can't get a hold of them, you could always contact your supervisor, the district leaders, and they'll be able to direct you to somebody who can help you with your wildlife management plan and your MLD information.
A question here. So if we are not 80% or above on the 5 years, will we be not movement qualified even though we are compliant now?
That's a good question. And yeah, we do have a distinction between the previous reporting and your 5-year overall testing. Now we provide that 5-year information because that is one of the ways you can qualify for TC1 status. But as long as you were compliant with the minimum testing for the previous report year, you'll remain movement qualified. So even if your 5-year testing rate is below 80%, but as long as it was 80% or above in the previous report year, then you will remain movement qualified. There's no problem with that. It's just if you had tested 80% in the previous report year to remain movement qualified, and you had tested 80% of your total mortalities over the past 5 report years, then you could also be TC1 by that standard. So that's why that 5-year testing rate information is provided in TWIMS. So
that's all the questions we have.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to be it. Again, I want to thank Patrick and Texas Deer Association for hosting us this morning. We certainly appreciate your hospitality. It's been very nice to come and speak with all of you today. If you have additional questions, feel free to call us. Our phone number for our office, our shared line, is 512-389-4585. And you can always contact us by phone or by email, and we'll try and get you the information you need as soon as possible.
And folks, just to finish up, again, thank y'all for coming. And we will share this recording both with the department, and y'all can share it if you'd like, and
Excellent.
we'll share it with our membership as well, and can walk through this step by step at a later date for folks who couldn't attend as well.
Excellent. Sounds great. And we'll also provide, we have slides, and we'll get you a copy of that as well. So you can provide that information. The text in the slides wasn't necessarily the most comprehensive, but at least gives you a structure to have a look into. So,
okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.